My name is Emma, and welcome to Casting the Net, a new youth-led series hosted by teens for teens exploring the breadth and depth of our online worlds. In each episode, we cast the net wide to learn about the opportunities and challenges the internet brings and to hear from experts from around the globe. There has been big steps forward in AI over the past decade, from online shopping to streaming platforms or using the apps on our phones. AI is already changing how we live, learn, and work. One of the AI developments that has attracted a lot of attention since it came on the scene late last year is ChatGPT. With people excited about the possibilities that it may provide, but also sparking a lot of ethical concerns too. To find out more, I'm joined by science and technology journalist Elaine Burke. Elaine is host of the For Tech's Sake podcast, a co-production from Silicon Republic and the HeadStuff podcast network. Thanks for joining me, Elaine. We will look at the pros and cons of ChatGPT and AI more generally in a few minutes. But first, for the people who may not fully understand what ChatGPT is, can you explain it and how it generates content?
Okay, thank you so much for that introduction and for having me here. And so ChatGPT, kind of the clue is in the name, really. So it's a chat bot, essentially. So that's where you get the chat part from. And the GPT part is from the large language model that underpins it. So that's basically a piece of technology that powers this tool for us, this chatbot to deliver us outputs from our inputs. The GPT that ChatGPT uses, depending on which version you're using, can be slightly more powerful. So there's a version called GPT-3, which is the one that was introduced late last year and caused a lot of interest. It's actually technically GPT 3.5 version that ChatGPT is based on, and that's basically a generative pre-trained transformer. And for anyone who understands AI, they know what that means. But it just means it's a generative AI, so it can create things essentially. So it can create text, big blocks of text, big essays, responses to your queries. And transformers is just a name for the kind of language models that these technologies are. So transformers are very good at analyzing blocks of text, understanding how words in a blocks of text relate to one another. And they're really good at understanding sequences. So they can then generate their own sentences because it kind of, from its analysis of blocks of text, it then realizes that, this is how you construct sentences. So it's not necessarily that it understands language. It's just that it's bank of analysis of lots and lots and lots of text, like text that's all across the internet, gives it the ability to see the patterns in that and stitch them together for itself, and to do that comprehensively in a way that doesn't just read like gibberish to us, but actually reads like comprehensive sentences. There's now a version called GPT-4. So again, that's a later model from GPT-3 to 3.5 to 4. And that's available on ChatGPT Plus, which is the paid version of ChatGPT. So if you're playing around with the free version, you're likely using 3.5. If you're using the paid version, it's version 4. And the difference between those is just the amount of parameters in their models. And basically, a larger number of parameters just kind of makes a model more complex. And if you're in the AI space, you would see it as being more comprehensive. And the scale of these is quite large. So GPT-3 had 175 billion parameters. And the more parameters you get, the harder it is to kind of understand yourself as a human being what these systems are doing, because you can't analyze the interactions between 175 billion parameters. No one could. And GPT-4 is working off of, I think it's 100 trillion parameters. So just a phenomenal scale. And that's a lot of computing power as well behind those kind of systems. And so there's also things to talk about when it comes to AI in terms of energy usage and computing power and that as well.
Some people have described it as a game changer. Is it, and why?
So I think what's gotten people really, really excited is the generative aspects of this technology. So we, as you said, like we've been using AI for a really, really long time. It's not a new tool by any means, but it's evolving constantly because the models get bigger, the models get more sophisticated, they get better at giving what we would call correct outputs, as opposed to things like what the developers would call hallucinations, where you might ask it, what's 2 + 2? And it says 5, because a logical answer for the computer to give you is 5, because it's not a calculator, it's an AI that's just stitching words together in a sentence. So they're trying to minimize the number of hallucinations and make them more accurate. And the generative AI aspect is where you get things like ChatGPT and chatbots. And again, chatbots aren't real. I think it's just the sophistication of ChatGPT and how some people are interpreting that, having not played around with some of the earlier tools and realized how powerful this technology was up until this point. And some people mistake that for it's a machine that understands, or it's a machine that has sentience or cognition, and is really like, we use terms like learning around AI, but it's not really learning. It's just like matching things in databases and that kind of thing. So we use a lot of human language around AIs, and that causes problems and misunderstandings. And it gets people's back up a bit because they see this tool being able to produce a whole essay in a couple of seconds, like a 10,000 word thesis, with just a few text prompts put into it. And people think, oh no, that does change the game. I don't have to do all the research and spend months writing things and editing things to generate something like that. I can just put it into an AI and get it. And with imagery, so a lot of these are powering image generators as well. So you've got DALL-E, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion. All of these take text and turn it into images, and that scares people who work in the creative industries, because their job is to create images from text prompts. They are given a brief from a client and they create an illustration or a graphic or even an animated video out of that. And now an AI can do that in seconds, and it'd be much cheaper than hiring a person to spend hours doing that. So I think that's where the game-changing element and a bit of fear comes from.
One of the biggest concerns that has been mentioned is the impact that it may have on education. For example, it may be used by students to create assignments or do homework. How much of an issue could this be?
I think it will definitely depend on the students. There's always been an element of an honor system when it comes to the work that students produce, especially in the age of the internet, where you have access to even things like Wikipedia and other resources online. That, I mean, you could be tempted to just copy and paste, and your assessors will have the ability to detect things like that. So there's plagiarism detectors out there, up to college level. They're used, and you could even just search a block of text and check that it wasn't used elsewhere. And even in journalism and fact checking in journalism, you do checks like that. So, when it was straight copy and paste from sources on the internet, that was easy to check against. When you have these generative AIs, what they're actually trained to do is to not copy and paste. So, they really shouldn't give you a pure replication of something that already exists. It should be trying to kind of knit together something novel and new on the topic that you've asked for. So if you ask for an essay on something, it shouldn't just pick one of the best essays online about that and reproduce that for you. What it should do is kind of cobble together aspects of many, many essays on that topic and give you something new, which is essentially what a lot of students are doing when they're producing content like that as well. And can do that in seconds. So that's a lot harder to detect, because you can't just kind of pop it into a detection engine that has kind of analyzed all of the text available online and can compare and contrast and see how much it matches up. There are some tells as well that I find with kind of chatbot written content where it's kind of overly verbose. It prattles on a little bit, not really good at getting to the point. And like I said, it doesn't really have cognition. It doesn't have emotion and nuance and stuff like that. So it doesn't have a lot of personality. There is kind of an overlaying cheerfulness to a lot of these apps, but that's just kind of like nearly like a customer service bot element to the whole thing. But there is something disingenuous about it as well. And I don't know if it's just because I've been using and working with these technologies for a really long time and analyzing them for a really long time. I feel like I can sense that a lot of the time. But I'm not saying that I would never be fooled by a ChatGPT submission. It's really hard. So they are trying to put in safeguards like kind of like technology watermarking. So like nothing that you'd see visibly on your outputs, but something that's like a stamp in the code of the technology that says this was generated by ChatGPT. They're talking about, I think in China, there's a rule now where if you're interacting with an AI, or if an AI has generated what you're interacting with, you have to be told that as a customer or as a user. So kind of safeguards like that are being worked on, but this will be a cat and mouse game where, like with a lot of technology, where the safeguards will do so much, and then someone will come up with a workaround, and then they'll have to come up with something to take over that, and then there'll be another workaround, and that'll constantly happen. So I think for educators, like they're really just going to have to build a lot of trust with their students, to really interrogate understanding of topics that their students are working on, and that is kind of beyond that surface level, beyond what you could just search online or generate via ChatGPT. So it makes things really, really challenging for educators, and they'll need to become really good analysts of what is generated content from a bot versus from a student, which is, I don't envy them that task. It's going to be difficult.
Is it possible to detect if something has been created by ChatGPT or other chatbots?
Yeah, so there are systems in place, but what you'll get is if the teachers know about the systems in place, then the students will too, and some quite clever coders among them will find those workarounds around it. So the thing is, the more you even publicize the solutions, the easier it is to create the workarounds around them as well. So you just get locked in this never-ending battle, and it's similar to cybersecurity as a constant cat and mouse game where you create, walled gardens and login systems and verification engines and things like that to protect people. And the more they become in use, the more people learn how they work and the more they can kind of work around them. So that's the thing about technology. It's just, it seems to be antagonistic in a way where if something is built on tech, well, then it can be gamed by tech. And that's just the world that we're going to end up living in now. So like, I mean, what teachers can do in that respect is like, maybe do they need to look away from typed up submissions, go back to handwritten things. So at least you have, if you got ChatGPT to generate those thousands of words, you'd still have to write them down yourself. And for students themselves, like, and workers, people might decide to use this to get them started on something. And do we want to discourage that? If it does actually help people, if it's good for the brainstorming stage or because starting with a blank page is always really, really hard. I know that as a journalist, and there are really good uses for a ChatGPT to get you started on something. So do teachers want to enter into an age where they actually talk about responsible use of ChatGPT and how to do that? And I think like it's something that would have come up a lot when Wikipedia first came about, and there was like a problem with Wikipedia citations and things not being fully verified on that platform. Now Wikipedia has come on in leaps and bounds since then, but also I think there's a general understanding that people know that because it's crowdsourced, you should take things on it with a pinch of salt and double check them and verify them. So I think that kind of new level of literacy will now be needed around AI and AI generated content the same way we had to learn before.
There's also been question marks about its potential to spread misinformation or to impersonate people. What are the ethical and moral concerns about its use?
So that's really, really interesting to me. That's an area that I've been quite concerned with for a long time. Because even before we had ChatGPT, we had a problem with these things called deep fakes, which can be really, really convincing video or even imagery of a person that you know that's a notable character, maybe politically relevant or a celebrity, and it really, really looks like them and sounds like them, but it's not them. And they could be then kind of be part of footage that has them saying something that they never said. So there's funny examples of that. So there's a man who's a Tom Cruise impersonator who does a Tom Cruise deepfake. So he teamed up with a visual effects specialist, and combined, they're able to make a very, very convincing fake Tom Cruise who's publishes videos on TikToks that are quite funny. There's another one that's Keanu Reeves. Are those actors even relevant to the kids listeners? I don't know. But I found that very entertaining. But that can get very easy become not entertaining and become a source of disinformation. You have political figures saying things that they never said. And where that gets sketchier is when the technology becomes more advanced. So the reason why the Tom Cruise deepfake on TikTok is a Tom Cruise impersonator is because as a physical body, he can get the mannerisms of Tom Cruise correctly because he is a professional Tom Cruise impersonator, and he can do the voice, because they were things that the AI wouldn't have been as good at doing. The AI would have been good at mapping a version of Tom Cruise's face onto this man's face to make him look even more like Tom Cruise, but he already had a bit of his hairline and a bit of his jawline. So the closer the impersonator was, the better it worked previously. But even in a few short years, that has also come on really effectively. And there's technology now where you only need maybe a few seconds or a few minutes of audio of someone's voice to create an artificial version of their voice that says anything that you want it to do. And I've heard that technology in effect. Now, why would people be building technology like that? Well, so there are conditions that people have called aphasia, where they lose the ability to speak. And Charlie Bird would be a famous example in Ireland of someone who went through that. And a man and a broadcaster who was famous for his voice. That was very affecting for him. And he worked with a company called Merino Software to basically give himself his voice back through some technology. So there are great use cases for these kind of technologies, because that was something that Charlie Bird really wanted in his life and was able to get. But the flip side of that is that when you have this wonderful use case, and against that you have the possibility of rampant disinformation. And the thing about generative AI and just in general, it's going to become very, very, very easy to spin up a misinformation or disinformation campaign in seconds, because GPT-4 in particular can be given a sketch or an outline of a website and deliver you the code of that website. So you could generate a news website, content for that website, articles saying things that you want them to say that look legitimate. You could even create personas of authors and journalists. You could create an entire biography of a company you could make everything look so legitimate, and it would take you a couple of hours maybe, and you could even generate images and stuff like that of fakery. And that's something that the web may quickly become, because we already have a lot of problems with content on the web because of systems being gamed for algorithms. So content that's not very good but has all of the ingredients it takes to be top of a search results page on Google. These are the constant challenges that we've already had online that have gotten really bad at the moment. And when you add generative AI to the mix, that gets a lot worse. And the thing about things that are generated by technology, it's very, very easy to generate them to game the technology, to deliver exactly the ingredients that will make it surface on social media, surface on search results pages, and become very prominent very quickly. So that's quite a scary reality that we are approaching into. And I try not to get too caught up in the whole scaremongering of it all, because it kind of validates an attitude that I've had to the internet growing over a number of years. And I've literally grown up on the internet. Like I was 12 when we got our first computer connected internet, and that's a long time ago. Just get off it, use it less. That's my advice. Very, very online people, what I call them, tend not to be the healthiest for many, many reasons, because the internet has this capacity to serve the worst angels of our nature, I try to say. So its recommendations engines aren't really good for you. It will deliver you things that you don't want. You think you're dipping into your social media platforms for a bit of fun, but very quickly you realize I've been on this for an hour and I've had no fun whatsoever. So I think if this actually spurs people to get a bit of a more healthy attitude to the internet and use it a bit less, maybe it's not such a bad thing, but maybe that's just me being a bit optimistic about it.
It has been reported in recent weeks that ChatGPT is to be updated to become more human. What does this mean?
So there's a lot of hype around these systems, and the real challenge will be dispensing the hype from the actual news. And in the tech sector, that's really troubling, because there's a lot of journalists in tech who are tech evangelists and tech champions, and they think all tech is good. The reason why I have a podcast called For Tech's Sake is because I think some tech is just for tech's sake, and it's not for us, it's not for the benefit of anybody. And I'm just a lot more critical and a lot more skeptical about technology. I'm still a fan of the good stuff. The good stuff is good, and it's been amazing to have these tools. But I think there's a whole lot of it that's just to make wealthy people wealthier and entrap us into systems that actually don't benefit us at all. So that's my little tech rant over there. And what you get with AI is we are in a hype machine at the moment when it comes to AI. And we also, because it's become such a mainstream news story, it's not even just the tech reporters reporting on it. So you have a lot of journalists now writing about ChatGPT who don't have a fundamental understanding of large language models or algorithms and how they work, or the like appropriate language to use around these things. And that's fair enough. I mean, it's really challenging for a journalist to know absolutely everything about what you're writing about, and they have to learn things on the hoof. I'm well aware of that. But the challenge there is that they start to co-opt the language that they're given from the people who are trying to promote these technologies. So the companies that are developing AI end up controlling the narrative around AI, because it's their press releases, it's their content that is then used to produce the stories around them. And then you get Like even the phrase artificial intelligence, that's just the name of this field of science. So any scientists that work in it, like they just understand that's just the name of a field of science that includes things like machine learning and deep learning, and all that kind of stuff, and models and lots of technical stuff, lots of data. But the name to us as general people who aren't scientists, artificial intelligence. Okay, so that's a simulation of human intelligence. That's an aspirational name. It's not that, and it's far from being that. It's still computer systems that work within the limits of computer systems. Like our brains, we don't even understand how human intelligence works. So we're not going to be able to program that anytime soon. And we're certainly even further away from things like emotional intelligence. Like people only even discovered that phrase in recent years. And that's actually a really important aspect of being human. So if you speak to cognitive scientists with experience in AI, they're some of the most interesting people talking on these topics, because they not only understand AI, they understand cognition and how people think and how they understand. And as far as they're concerned, this is so far from cognition or any kind of human level intelligence. And there's talk now they want to get something called AGI, which is artificial general intelligence. That would be more human-like. That's probably what you're referring to in the question. We're so far from that if we ever even get there. What we find with these systems is they become quite advanced. Like I think Google's language learning model, its accuracy just plateaued at 95%. It got better and better and better and better and better. And then it hit 95% and it just seemed to sit there. So I think there'll just always be a gap and a limit to how much this technology can mimic what humans can do. But it can do things really, really well to help us, because it can do things really, really quickly. Again, in the medical technology space, I think is where it will have most relevance. So something like if you are trying to analyze scans of people's lungs or internal organs and stuff like that, to detect anomalies like cancerous tumors and things like that. If you have a vast database that a system with computer vision, and computer vision is a form of AI, so basically a computer system that can see things essentially, and that can analyze a vast database of that and assist a doctor or consultant in making more accurate diagnoses based on a whole backlog that doctor will never be able to do as a human being, because the scale is too much for the human being. So they're very, very useful in doing things at huge scale, but they'll never, ever, in my lifetime, and I don't think in your lifetime either, be as clever as we are. Even though we can still be very, very stupid some of the time, we're actually very clever.
Join us in part 2, where we will continue our chat about ChatGPT and AI.